Okay, go.
Okay, so like I said, I did mine on Brazilian modernism because modernism is one of my favorite movements in art and literature and music. But I'm mostly familiar with European and American modernism, which you probably are too, as I said. But I hadn't ever really thought about the reverberations internationally. And so in studying Tropicalia, we all sort of know how the Cannabis Manifesto inspired that and the idea of like cultural appropriation. But that sort of came out of the Brazilian modernist movement, which was inspired by the European modernist movement. And so in my research, I was reading a really interesting article entitled Brazilian Modernism. And the author said that Brazilians sought to modernism because one of the basic tenets of it is breaking from the past. Because Europe at the time, prior to the 20th century, was really steeped in this deeply entrenched classical tradition. And so the modernists sought to break from that completely, and that's where you get compositions like Stravinsky and paintings like Kandinsky. They're just all over the place. And he said that that's what Brazilians really liked because it allowed them to get away from the European tradition that they've sort of been inundated with for centuries before that. And he said they liked it because that most trends prior to that arrived in Brazil full-blown and from abroad. So they never really had that opportunity for cultural and artistic appropriation up until modernism, which gave them the chance to break away from that. But in keeping with the tenets of the Cannabis Manifesto that was written at the time, they had the opportunity to break away from the past while also reconnecting with it and reabsorbing different traditions to make it a uniquely Brazilian movement. And so I focused on three artists, Tarsila do Amaral, which we saw on campus, and then Hector Villalobos and Mario Andrade. And Hector Villalobos was a composer, and Mario Andrade was an ethnomusicologist, and also, yeah, I'd studied. Don't make me laugh or cough. And then he also was a composer, and he also wrote poems as well. So I focused on them because, interestingly enough, they all had experience in Europe, so they were exposed to the European tradition. And Brazil at the time, like I said, prior to really being introduced to modernism, was very much steeped in a very classical school of composition and painting. You can open your chips, Veronica, it's okay. So they studied in Europe for a while during the 20s, and that's when modernism was really erupting there. And so they caught on to that tradition and brought it back to Brazil. And Mario Andrade is really credited with being one of the pioneers of Brazilian modernism, just for the way he studied ethnomusicology, which is the study of sort of the cultural origins of music. I can't really explain it very well. It's still a concept that I'm trying to grasp. And his poems, which got back, he wrote a book. He wrote a book called Macunaíma, which is about a boy in Brazil, and he travels from Sao Paulo to the jungles. And so, doing that, it brought back a lot of folkloric traditions and traditional sort of languages and terms. And so that was a reconnection with traditional language, folklore, and that sort of lost part of the native Brazilian history in poetry. And Tarsila and Hector also sought to do that in their music and their art. And in Tarsila's paintings, you see really interesting, vibrant sort of colors that you might associate with Latin America or Brazil, contrasted by these heavy, dark lines and industrial symbols. And similarly, in Hector's music, you have really native styles and instruments and even music that are words contrasted with sort of European traditions. So it's trying to balance the European style that they've already been influenced with new Brazilian traditions and trying to reappropriate different styles. So that's what I talked about.
Okay. Thank you, Julia.